last few weeks, some of the important articles have appeared in Indian Express and the Hindu. And these articles were basically talking about a new evolving dimension in the Indo-Pacific region. And this is our topic of discussion, that is Indo-Pacific. Now, in the recent times, what US has done under Donald Trump, who is having a transactionary nature with India particularly, he has renamed or he has tried to move India away from the concept of Indo-Pacific, which was generated by US only, to highlight a confluence of sea among the Indian Ocean and that of the Pacific Ocean, where earlier this concept was known as the Asia-Pacific, and later to showcase the important role played by India in ensuring freedom of navigation in the Indian Ocean region, it was renamed as Indo-Pacific. Now, Trump has signaled that they are no longer interested in the concept of Indo-Pacific, and rather they are pushing for an idea which is called as G2. They are pushing for an idea of G2. There is the two great powers, where Trump is pushing for an idea of two great powers like that of China and second is United States of America. Thus, clearly demarcating the areas so that these alliances and counter-alliances which are being formed in the form of Russia, China and Iran, and that of what we call as India, US, Japan, South Korea can be completely delineated from each other. Now, this is an important article from perspective of PSIR also, and also from IR in perspective of GS2. But particularly from the PSIR perspective, this topic becomes extremely important. And how do we differentiate it from GS2? In GS2, we will study Indo-Pacific as just a GS phenomena. But in PSIR, we have to study it through what we call as a phenomena leading to theories, or the theories being replicated through a practical phenomena of Indo-Pacific. So if we look at Indo-Pacific, which is the possible phenomena that can explain Indo-Pacific, is the theory which was given by Alfred T.Mahan. Alfred T.Mahan has given a theory regarding the ocean per se, where he concluded that those powers who will control the ocean will control the world. He was of the opinion the countries with strong navy, the countries with a lot of maritime ports, the countries with seaborne trade will ultimately be a country that will be controlling the economy, and those who will be controlling the oceans will be controlling the world. Another theory that can be used is the theory of Spykman. Spykman's theory was though not given for Indo-Pacific, but it completely applies for the Indo-Pacific. And some scholars have called Indo-Pacific as modern Rimland. They have called Indo-Pacific as modern Rimland. And they say that Indo-Pacific reflects the modern Rimland. Spykman is credited for the Rimland theory. And he believes that the real power lies with the countries who will control the Rimland. And his theory was Rimland Eurasian theories. Meaning thereby, Eurasia will be controlled by those countries who will have control over the water bodies near the Rimland. And this can also be considered true for what we call as Indo-Pacific, which is called as modern Rimland. And the recent intensification of confrontation or conflict in the Indo-Pacific region is a testimony of the same. Now, the next thing to understand that this theory can also be explained from classical theory of realism in political science. Realism can also explain this classical theory. Realism theory says that there will be an aspirational power that will try to check the contemporary hegemon. In this, aspirational power is basically our China, and the rising power, basically here being China, is challenging the dominance of USA. And realism has also various subsets to it, wherein one of the school is given by John Mearsheimer, who talks about offensive realism, basically highlighting the preparedness that a country will do while anticipating any kind of possible attack that the country can face in the future. So realism also explains the increasing confrontation in the Indo-Pacific region, where US is trying to balance it with partnering with countries like Australia, India, Japan, Korea. And at the same time, China is also trying to assert itself more and more in this region by highlighting the dominance through 9-line, 10-line, or by exploring the areas by establishing air defense identification zone and highlighting that the South China Sea belongs to China. So this is a point of confrontation. Let us understand what is the concept of Indo-Pacific first. Indo-Pacific is basically a geopolitical construct. Now then we have seen the theories, let us understand it from the understanding of IR, that it is a geopolitical construct highlighting Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean as a single and integrated strategic theater. It has both strategic as well as the economic dimension, meaning thereby this has both strategic as well as maritime dimension to it. And this area is important because it represents 65% of the world population. It also represents 60% of the global GDP, 50% of the merchandise trade of the world, and 25 to 40% of seaborne trade that happens to Malacca. So Indo-Pacific region is a very important region, not only for India, not only for China, not only for US, but for the global trade, global security, etc. Now this concept of Indo-Pacific is not very new. It earlier developed in the writings of Carl, wherein he in 1920s he has talked about the concept of Indo-Pacific. This concept gained momentum during what we call as the famous speech given by Shinzo Abe under his Confluence of Two Seas. And in this Confluence of Two Seas, he was explaining the concept of linkages between Indian Ocean and that of Pacific Ocean. Then Australia also came into the picture by releasing a white paper regarding the counter alternative to Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. The USA had called this area as a part of their Pacific Command and basically started a policy which is called as the Asia Pacific, called this region as Asia Pacific. Later on, this was renamed as into the Indo-Pacific Command in 2018. India also started integrating into this region by officially launching Shangri-La Dialogue. This was also seen with respect to Japan, where Japan has come out with the concept of free and open Indo-Pacific region. This was even reiterated by South Korea, where it has come out with what we call as Southern policy. It was also seen with regard to what we called as informal setup in the form of establishment of Quad between India, Japan, Australia and USA. So the concept of Indo-Pacific has been evolving. It is not a new concept. It has gained prominence, particularly if you see the inflection point. What is the inflection point? It is this 2013, where after launching of Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, it is seen as Chinese assertive rise. This concept of Indo-Pacific gained more and more prominence as the rise of China became more and more assertive, and it basically began to challenge what we call as the influence of other countries that are putting or sitting into this area. So when the interests started to collide and China started to move away from the era of peaceful rise to the era of aggressive rise, Indo-Pacific became more and more dominant in this concept. Now, why Indo-Pacific matters for India is a big question. 50% of the trade that India does and 90% of all oil and energy import that India does, it basically happens through this region. So Indo-Pacific is of critical importance. We trade close to $128 billion of trade with ASEAN countries alone. Then comes Japan, then comes the other countries of this region. So this region is very important for trade, merchandise trade, as well as what we call as energy security. This is very important for energy security also. So this is why it makes it important for India. India is an energy deficit country. We do not have the resources that are required like that of crude oil and natural gas, and we have seen if a choke point is created, how much it will become difficult for India. Then we also have what we call as sea lines of communication and choke points here. We have thus seen how a small choke point like that of Strait of Hormuz can create a security issue for India in terms of energy security, how the people's life, normal people will be impacted because of this thing. So it becomes very important. This area is also notorious for what we call as our non-traditional factors like what we call as piracy. So this is also where India needs to come into picture. Then India has a realistic challenge. If we talk purely in terms of IR, India has a realistic challenge coming from China, where the scholars allege, this is not officially the Indian language, which is what scholars have written, that in China is practicing something called as string of pearls around India, where it is establishing their extraterritorial bases in countries around India. They have done it for Bangladesh, they have done it for Myanmar, they have done it for Sri Lanka, they have done it for Pakistan, which you might have heard as Gwadar port, they have done it for Sri Lanka, Hambantota port, they have also done it for Djibouti, they have done it for Myanmar in the form of Kuyakpio port, they are in talks with Chittagong port. So they are establishing ports in and around the territories of India, which is creating a security situation which scholars called as string of pearls, and their modern way to choke India in event of any conflict between India and China. Then India also has a geopolitical aspiration, that is, it wants to showcase that India favors a rule-based order. Whenever there is a question regarding who will have the dominance over Indo-Pacific, India has a very clear-cut stand, and this has been the official Indian policy stand regarding the Indo-Pacific, that we do not aspire to become great power. We are happy with our middle power status, and we just want that the rules should be same for all the people. And India believes in the idea of liberalism also. So it believes that a rule-based order should be there, and every country, no matter big or small, should be bound by the same. And last is India's own goal of attaining the concept of blue economy or the ocean-led development. So all these reasons make India basically very dependent on the concept of Indo-Pacific. So what is India's vision? I have told you again only, free and open, inclusive Indo-Pacific is what it is projected by India, that we want a rule-based order. A common rule-based order is needed. We want Asian centrality into this region, because if you understand why India is talking about Asian centrality, because a few years back there was a case filed against China by a small country in the ASEAN known as Philippines. So Philippines has filed a case against China regarding its incursion into the South China Sea region and how it was creating a conflict for India. So this was written by China. This was where India took a stand for this area. So this is where also we are participating in this sense. So we are believing in Asian centrality. At that point of time, the UNCLOS gave a judgment against China. So India believes in the concept of Asian centrality. It believes in the concept of equal access and treats the high sea region as global commons, not as a property of any one country. And we do not believe in alliances. This is the most important thing. All our directions, all our partnership in the Indo-Pacific region are in the nature of partnership. They are not alliances. Alliances mean they are being directed towards any other country. We are not directing our partnership against China. We are entering into partnership to strengthen the joint exploration and common exploration for that of a rule-based order. It is not directed against any other country, including China. So India's focus is on partnership, not on alliances. And India has launched various projects like that of Sagar, Mahasagar, etc. What has India done in the institutional framework? India has established India-Pacific Division in 2019 and division in 2016 under MEA to basically look after this area. So we have a specific division related to the Indian Ocean region under Ministry of External Affairs that will talk about Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean region as a whole. We also have launched Act East policy. We also are conducting India-Pacific Oceans Initiative, and we also have India-Pacific Regional Dialogue in the same sense. So this is our institutional mechanism highlighting how India takes Indo-Pacific region seriously. The next thing that we are doing is security and naval strategy that we have taken, wherein we have also established IFC, Indian Ocean region, Indian Information Standard regarding the Indian Ocean region. We are entering into joint and multilateral exercise and as a part of Malabar, as a part of Project Varuna, Ocean-Dix, and various projects like that of with Thailand, etc., or Indonesia. So this is what we are doing with regard to the exercise. India is mostly one of the first responder to this area, where we take an implement role in HADR operation, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operation. So we want to project it ourselves as a net security provider also in this region. Not only blue water economy, but also as a net security provider. So we are also helping in the concept of HADR, that is humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And then we are also exporting the defense equipments to these countries, where we have exported BrahMos to the likes of countries like that of Philippines. Recently we have agreed it for Vietnam. So we are also exporting the defense exports. Not only this, we are also signing various multilateral agreements and multilateral agreements like that of Quad, or entering into trilateral agreements that what we can call as India, France, Australia trilateral. So we have entered into various trilateral agreements also. To counter the Chinese strategy, India has also launched its own necklace of diamond strategy. What is India's own necklace of diamond strategy that it has launched? So we are basically countering China by building our own partnership with the countries in and around India, where we are also establishing ports. For example, if China is sitting in Pakistan as a form of Gwadar port, so we have also entered into agreement with Iran for establishing Chabahar port. If China is sitting in Djibouti, so we are sitting in Oman as a part of Dukmu port. If China is sitting in what we call as Myanmar as a part of Kyokpo port, so we are also developing the port in Myanmar, which we know as the Kaladan multimodal transport project, in which we have developed the Sitwe port. So we are countering them, and these are examples of the same. Chabahar port in Iran, Sabang port in Indonesia, Changi naval base in Singapore, Agalega port and Assumption Island in Mauritius and Seychelles respectively, Sitwe port in Myanmar, Dukma port in Oman. So this is what India is trying to do institutionally here. We have also launched our soft power initiative like that of Project Mausam. We have also launched what we call the diaspora outreach event like that of partnering with countries like that of FIPIC. So we have established what we call as FIPIC, for Forum for Indo-Pacific Island Cooperation. This is also what we are trying to do with respect to them. But the last thing that we need to consider is what are the challenges that we face. India faces a set of challenges. What is the set of challenges that we face? First is capability and ambition gap. Navy only gets 15% of the total defense budget. And our defense budget, when you compare it with the countries like that of China or US for that matter, it is very less. In that less budget, Navy gets only 15% of the budget. So the ambition and capability, there is a gap. Second thing is that the China dilemma. Now India focuses that our partnership in Indo-Pacific region is not against China. So if we will increase our partnership to a level that it can outstrip China, it can create a antagonizing Beijing in our backyard. And China will basically be against us then. So we do not want to give this message to China, otherwise it will deteriorate our security. It is a risk of over-securitization. This is called in IR as a risk of over-securitization. Because if we will take a step, China will also respond with the same. So it will over-securitize. It will create an insecurity and security dilemma between the countries. So this is also a risk that we are facing. Then divergent partners are there. US is now advocating for G2. We are not a member of AUKUS. So there is also issue of divergent partnership. Then the next problem is that economic underweight. We are not a member of transatlantic partnership. We are not a member of partnerships like that of RCEP. So we are not these members. So what is being done here is that we are not economic complementary for each other. And when we will not economic complementary, the level of partnership between the countries or the complex interdependence will not happen. So this is another problem that we face. Then there is interdependence with China. India's own trade with China is close to $150 billion. So when our own economic interdependence is with China, and this our partnership with other countries, for example with that of Japan or ASEAN, remains underutilized, so there is no point in near future, that we can basically make sure that we reduce our dependence on China. Then India has a track record of slow project delivery. All our projects under Asia-Africa Growth Corridor or in the northeastern region or what we call as the other regions of this area, IMT highway, we have not delivered on time. For example, IMT highway, India-Myanmar-Thailand highway, was launched 10 years back and it has still completed only 70% of its work. Myanmar is problematic. We are not able to complete our Sittwe port. All of this is basically creating a problem related to slow project delivery. And then there is also a domestic criticism of India getting its foreign policy aligned too close to US, and US is following a transactionary foreign policy towards India, where we have to take the permission for US in the recent times. It has been alleged by the domestic critics in India. So all these factors are basically presenting challenges before India. So we have understood Indo-Pacific from the perspective of theories of IR, and also what is the way of engagement of India and where India faces the problem.